So
Hmm.
you mentioned it was a few years before you really got your first hit. 4 years, I think you said. So what things were you doing in the meantime to try to kind of own your craft and become better as a songwriter?
I was doing everything I could possibly think of to do. So Kim, that was my publisher, he became a Hall of Fame songwriter. He had been on 100 million records and was in the height of Garth mania when I joined him. So he was getting Garth cut after Garth cut. So just, I would pick his brain. He would mentor me on my songs and show me how to make them better. But I would, when I had free time, I was reading every book that I could read on songwriting.
Mm-hmm.
He had a big CD player that had like 100 CDs that had his whole catalog on it. And so if I had an hour, I'd go in there and just listen to some of his songs. All right, so I would go listen to Kim's catalog and just try to learn from him. We had another writer, Ron Harbin, that was having a lot of hits, and I would learn from him. But I just tried to become a sponge. I early. Oh, there it goes again. Have you still got me?
Yep, I got you.
Yeah. Um, I just tried to become a sponge and learn everything I could, and I would do things like because I didn't perform as a songwriter at that point. I would often write a song, and Kim would say, "Who would want to sing this every night?" And I'm like, "Well, it's a great story," and he'd be like, "Yeah, it's a great story, but no one wants to get up and say that." And one of the examples was I wrote a song called "The Shadow of a Man," and it was about a boy seeing his dad go into the house across the street and embrace the woman that lived there through the sheer curtains. And so his father became the shadow of a man because he knew he was cheating on his mom.
Wow.
And so I played that for Kim, and I wrote the heck out of the song, and he said that's maybe the best song I've ever heard that won't ever get cut. And he said, but imagine if Luke Bryan gets up every night and he's singing that song, everybody's going to think his dad cheated on his mom,
Mm-hmm.
and he's not going to do that to his dad. So people think the artist wrote those songs and they think that they're true to their experience and that kind of stuff. And so I had a big learning curve in that regard because I wasn't thinking like an artist. I wasn't going, I was just going, okay, this is a well crafted song, it's an interesting story, but I wasn't thinking about what would happen to an audience or to an artist if they cut that song.
So it's just basically the selling side of the songwriting business that was kind of lost on you at first, then, because like you're
Yeah.
you're you're telling your stories and you think you're doing well, but I mean somebody above you has to sell that song in order for money to be made and to warrant your employment and all of that. That's I mean that's an interesting way of looking at things. So I mean after that first hit, you had what, a year left on your deal at that point. As a songwriter, what steps do you take after your first hit to kind of avoid complacency? Is there a thought process involved there, or are you just kind of riding the high?
No, I mean, Kim was very good at keeping me grounded and all that. He said, this is not going to last forever with this one song. And, right now you're a one hit wonder. So you got to keep putting in the work. And he really impressed on me, that, you just have to keep working on it. And later on, I think it was at my number one party for Let Me Down Easy, my publisher came up to me and said, congrats, what's next? And so I mean, I think I've just
So
been surrounded by people
during the party, it's on to
during the
the next.
party.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And at first I'm like, well, can't you just let me celebrate this? And I thought, well, you know what? Actually, I wrote that song a year prior to that party or something, and if there's not something coming next, I'm in trouble. So
Mm-hmm.
I thought it's actually a valid question and a valid point to remind me just to keep working.
Yeah, it's fun. It's gonna be daunting. Like every time you have a hit, you're essentially back at square one. Like you're back to zero every single time. That's gonna be frightening, man. I
Yeah.
can't imagine.
And it having those hits opens some doors. The biggest thing that it does, I think, it people are listening to your songs more favorably. So instead of looking for a reason not to do it, they're looking for a reason for it to be great. Some maybe. But nobody's going to do me a favor. Billy Currington's not going to do me a favor just because I had a number one with him. It's got to
Mm.
be just as good or better the next time. And so there's no coasting through that kind of thing.
So how do you avoid? I mean, because human nature is we have success, then we try to replicate that success by essentially doing the same thing over and over again, repetition. You can't do that as a songwriter. You can't write the same song over and over again. So how do you avoid that?
Yeah. I think I'm I get bored if I'm doing the same thing a lot. And so for me, just pushing myself to be like, you know what, if I'm feeling bored with what I'm writing, then other people are going to be bored with what I'm writing. So I've got to find ways to challenge myself. One of the things I do, I kind of have a stable of a handful of people that I write with all the time, and we're all always bringing in different thirds with us because that keeps it. Mark Nessler and I've written for 25 years every other Wednesday, so it's easy to be complacent with Mark because I know we can write something great every single time. But if it's just me and him, sometimes it kind of tends to fall into the same category that we've got a lot of songs already, so we try to mix it up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also involved in I've got songs in several plays for musical theater. I'm building up a sync catalog that's not country. So I try to do lots of other things with my music other than just writing a country song every day, and that I think that makes it fresher. So I'll learn something in the sync world of the musical theater world. I can bring that into my country writing, and it shakes things up and challenges me.
And that's definitely one of the things that I admire most about you is your ability to go from one genre to another so seamlessly. Is there a change in your technique when you're going from one genre to another? Because I know that you're kind of self admitted lyrical writer and kind of learn melody more later. I would imagine the lyrics
Mhm.
don't change too much between genre. Maybe country's a little more um, I don't know, a little more vulnerable, maybe. But are there differences between when you're writing one genre versus
Mhm.
another?
Yeah, I think of genres as language overlays. So, like what we teach in Songtown is really communication. It's how to communicate with your music and your lyrics. So that remains the same everywhere. And but if I'm writing a pop song, I know that there's probably less story and there's more repetition.
Right.
There has to be more little hooky things coming at you faster, so there may be four or five different hooky parts as opposed to just my chorus and country and that kind of stuff. And then I have to speak the language. So when I first started trying to write pop songs for sync, I would get the feedback, hey, this is a pop track, but the lyric still feels country,
Mm-hmm.
and so I wasn't speaking the language very well. So I had to kind of do some homework to learn the language of pop better, so that I could more authentically write it. And, that happens when people try to write country. I had a huge pop writer that's a friend of mine one day called me and said, hey, I've got a country idea I want to write with you. And I'm like, okay, that'll be great, and his idea was cow patty. And I'm like, that's not quite where things are. I mean, and I said I don't really know of any artists singing about cow poop, and he was like, well, maybe I should stick to pop. But his version of country was the show Hee Haw,
Mm-hmm.
and so that like corny, very very rural kind of image was what he had. So he wasn't up to date on the language of country.
So that's cool how you put that. You had to learn the language of a different genre. That's amazing.